Have we got Henry here? Fantastic. Henry Olsen is a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center, a think tank in Washington, D.C. His pre-election predictions are the best. I mean, the guy is one of the great observers of electoral politics. He writes regularly for American Greatness. His last book is The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism, a really different look at Ronald Reagan. You can find it on Amazon.com. Henry, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So let's begin. Well, let's get to the important point immediately. What are you seeing in the midterms upcoming?
Well, I mean, right now it looks like the Democrats will take the House, Republicans will hold the Senate. They might gain a seat or two, but it's all very fluid. You've got all of these announcements about the president's supposed mental state. You've got the plea bargain that seems to have dropped his job approval slightly, but it's already started to rebound in polls in the last few days. So right now it looks good, but not great for the Democrats.
So if the economy is as good as it is, if we're at peace, things are going well, is this all about Trump's personality?
Well, it's about Trump's personality, Trump's character, and for many people, Trump's policies. That there are a lot of people who mask their disagreement with his policies, especially on immigration and trade, by reference to his character or his personality, when they would be 75 to 90% as opposed to somebody who was completely the most literate person since Shakespeare, who had the same thing. So it's all of that mixed in.
Where do you see the power line in terms of the electorate? If you were a Republican candidate, what would you be looking at in your district? Obviously, you have to speak generally because you can't speak to every district. But what would you be looking for in your district? Who would you be looking to sway?
Well, there's basically two types of districts. There's districts where the key voter is the former Republican who doesn't like Donald Trump. They tend to be in the suburbs. And high income educated. So if you're in Orange County and you're one of the endangered Republicans there, that's who you're looking to. The rest of the country, it's the Obama Trump voter, the person who didn't like Mitt Romney, the person who didn't vote for John McCain, but voted for Donald Trump. And in those places, you want to look at them and you want to ignore all what the Washington people are saying, which is all focused on the wrong type of voter.
Okay. When you say focused on the wrong type of voter, you mean the base?
Yeah, the Washington people will tell you to focus first on the base and then on the defective Republicans or the defecting Republicans. Whether they're defective depends on how you feel about the president. But for a lot of these people, success is going to come by winning the voters who didn't like Obama and put them in office in 2014 or 2010, who happen to be the same people who also crossed over to vote for Donald Trump, but don't generally like national Republicans. You focus on that voter and you can win. But if you don't know that voter's out there, you're not going to be sending the message that they'll hear. And, if you're just a same old Republican versus a same old Democrat, these people like same old Democrat.
I have this theory that Trump is more popular among blacks than blacks will admit to pollsters. I saw today in the LA Times, I think it was, a new poll showing that over 90% of blacks are going to vote Democrat in the upcoming races. Do you believe that there's any possibility that there is a hidden tide in Trump's favor? People who don't want to openly support Donald Trump, but see that they have jobs and see that the economy is going well and might go behind the curtain and vote for him?
Maybe, but it's not going to be large. That generally people tell the truth to pollsters. We know that people who are supportive of a character or a party which is disapproved of by the people who run media or business will tend to shy away from that. But the effect is only a couple of points. So if Trump and the Republicans are sitting at 40, maybe the real figure is 43. But that's a far cry from 50. Right. So, yes, but it's not very large.
Okay. Now, Trump has done a lot of the things that you've talked about in your book, The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism. You say what you've been saying for years, basically, which is that the Republican Party has been ignoring a working class that is no longer as religious and is more concerned about social programs that will keep them from falling off the bottom rung of the ladder, and that Reagan was concerned about. Trump seems to have appealed to them. Has he not? And if so, If so, why isn't he fulfilling, your idea that this would win back a majority?
Because he's alienating the suburbanites.
Mm.
The thing is, Ronald Reagan found a way to unite suburban moderate to moderately conservative Republicans with these working class voters and keep them in the same tent. Donald Trump not only has a problem with attracting those suburban voters, he actively seems to relish driving them away. And what you're doing is swapping out Romney suburbanites for Obama Trump working class voters. You're just rearranging the deck chairs on the losing Titanic. You're just going from first class to steerage as far as your passengers, but the ship's still going down.
Hmm. Okay. In Sweden, they are predicting that there could be a real big swing to the right. But at the same time, the populace there is divided by men and women. Are you seeing that here as well? The same. I mean, it's a really wide divide.
It's a huge divide. I mean, I follow Sweden intently. And you're going to have whether the party there that's populist and anti-immigrant finishes first or second, it'll be an amazing achievement that will destroy the ability of the governing alliances to govern without their consent. But what we know is that anti-immigrant populist parties attract men. They attract them in Britain, they attract them in Sweden, they attract them in Italy, and they attract them in the United States. They tend to repel women. And that's what you're seeing in other places, in Sweden and other places, is that women would like to have they always across the world tend to lean a little bit to the left, but when you're dominated by these sorts of passions, they tend to lean more to the left. And then you've got Donald Trump's issues with his past with regards to women, which is particularly exacerbating that. And you have a lot of independents who are women who are not willing to give the Republican Party the time of day.
In the question of immigrants, I mean, when in a country the size of Sweden, that incredible influx of immigrants is going to be felt very hard. We tend to absorb immigrants better, both because of our philosophy and because of the size. And yet, it does seem to me that there's an elite, they called it the steady state in that New York Times op-ed, but it's this elite state that will not hear the people's concerns about this. Does that seem to you to be true, or is that just an illusion thrown up by the fact that they can't make a decision, that no one can make a decision?
I call them the ins. That I wrote a piece for Unheard, English website that I write for, called The Ins versus the Outs. And what you're finding across the world is that if you're educated and you're relatively affluent, you tend to be less culturally conservative, and you're coming together because you're defending your privilege. And they don't view the rest of us very kindly. They don't like average people. At best, they disdain them, and at most, they despise them. And so consequently, there are, in the Sweden Democrats, it used to be a neo-Nazi party, but 19% of the Swedes who are going to vote for them are not neo-Nazis. They're upset at immigration. And the problem in Sweden is so large that they've had 400,000 people join their country as refugees in the last few years. Well, given the size of their country, that would be the same as if 13 million people showed up in the last 3 years here. What do you think would happen if 13 million people came across the Canadian border? You think would take it easily?
Yeah, yeah. And
but for the ends, they're so insular and they dislike so much the assertion of popular sovereignty or popular government or Republican self-government that they'll drop epithets at the people who are concerned about this at the drop of a hat. And that just makes more people angrier and angrier because they're not what they're being called.
So let me return finally. I know you have to go, and I will get you out of here. But let me return finally to the midterms. Your take now is that the standard idea is the GOP holds the Senate, but probably loses the House. How fluid is that? I mean, we're only now 2 months out. Yeah, 2 months out. How fluid is that, in your opinion?
Well, it's not fluid in the sense that there's going to be a red wave. That the president said back when he was campaigning for Troy Balderson outside of Columbus a month ago. But the only way there would be a red wave is if we had something like a Cuban Missile Crisis, If we have the North Korean missile crisis where we think we're going to all die, and then we have an agreement on October 27th, then maybe that would produce that. But other than that, we're just talking about magnitudes. If the president could get control of the news cycle in a way that favors him, maybe the losses could be stemmed to, where the Republicans could barely hold the House or barely lose the House. Maybe they'd gain a couple more seats in the Senate. But people have pretty much made up their minds, and it's only the margins that we're really talking about now.
Okay. And my last question, how does that trickle down to local government? I mean, one of the things about Obama is he gutted the party to the state house level. Are we in danger of giving it back?
Yeah, very much so. That, first of all, anybody who is a Republican who is running in a seat that Hillary Clinton carried ought to have a good insurance policy, because there's a good likelihood they're not coming back. There are 7,500 roughly, give or take a few hundred, legislative seats in the country. 500 of them are Republicans in Clinton-held districts. And then you've got all the governorships. Over the last decade, Republicans have basically taken almost all of the blue and purple territory that they could win. It's natural that they'd give some of that back. And if this year is going to be pro-Democratic, the only question, again, is how many governorships fall on that and where they are. It's a lot better for the Republican Party to lose the governorship of Maryland, although it looks like Larry Hogan is going to be fine, than to lose the governorships of Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Florida, all of which are large states, all of which have lots of seats that Republicans require in Congress when the redistricting comes up next time. And right now, Republicans are behind or running even in all of those 4 races.
Henry Olsen, one of the best, calmest political observers in the country, writes that American Greatness. His book is The Working Class Republican, Ronald Reagan and the Return of Blue-Collar Conservatism. Thanks a lot, Henry. I hope you come back as the midterms get closer.
Love to come back. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Always like talking to him because he's actually keeps a level head.